I thought we'd spend today discussing tongs again and continue on our evolutionary series from some very basic tongs to some that involve just a little bit more skill and a little different techniques. We've done the twisted tongs out of a piece of 1/4x1 stock. We've done a very similar pair of tongs from Ken's Custom Iron, the quick tongs or rapid tongs that are still flat stock tongs, still with the twist, but they come in a form that's mostly done for you. The hard work is done. All you have to do is refine them and make a good set of tongs out of them. And I still think these are probably what you should do for your very first pair of tongs. Make a couple of these the way we discussed in that video, and I'll try to put that link up here. And then go on to the simple flat stock tongs so that you get some experience drawing out the full length of the reins. It's a fair amount of work. It's not real hard, but you have to be willing to put the time into it. So we're going to go on from this point now, and we're going to make a very similar tong half. This tong is done very similarly in that you can start with a bar long enough to hold on to, so you don't need tongs to make these tongs, and you draw the reins out first. So we're going to start with a piece of 5/8 square bar, and we're going to just roughly draw out the reins from this 5/8 square bar. And we're going to get this part of it, probably 2/3 of it, finished. Then we will forge the jaw and clean this end up and refine the reins and blend all this together. But we're going to do this in a fairly typical old fashion and the way tongs are generally made, which is to first forge the jaw over the edge, turn it 90 degrees, forge the boss, and turn it 90 degrees and start working the reins. So the first thing to do, I'm going to center punch this at 5 inches, and I'm going to draw out from 5 inches out. Now you can see on this one, here's my punch. So I don't come right up to it, it's just a general guide. I just know I need about that much material to make a set of reins that I like. Right there's the punch mark. And if you're making a pair or more than one pair, try to make all of the reins come out about the same. Snowed last night, so I'm using the gas forge as much to heat the shop as anything else. Now we've talked about drawing out in several previous videos, so I'm not going to go in great detail on drawing this out. Just remember, square, octagon, and then round. So we'll get this almost to the point that we want it in square cross section, then we'll go to octagon, and then we'll finally round it up. Oh yeah, it's rainy today. And of course, drawing out over the horn is more efficient. So we were able to quiet that anvil down a little bit by snugging up the chain around it, adding a few more magnets to it. It's not ideal. You may notice that I shut my gas forge off when I come to the anvil. I only do that for the sake of the video. I would not do that during normal production. There's no reason to let it cool down. There's no reason to start and stop it. I just do that because it's so darn loud and you don't need to listen to it. Now that's pretty well drawn out. They're really ugly, really lumpy, bumpy. So we're going to go from the horn now to the face and clean that up, finish it in square, and then go to the octagon and the round. Make sure it's a nice even taper, or parallel if you want parallel. It's pretty much parallel through here before you start going to the round. You start rounding it up while it's lumpy and bumpy, you're just going to have to square it back up to fix it. Now how does that compare to one of my previous pieces? From the center punch mark, it's pretty close. We're about an inch off. By the time we round that up, I think we'll get that inch. Now this section up here close to where the jaw will be, I'll probably leave octagon anyways, but I'll also come back and work on it a little bit more later as we refine the jaws and that part of the reins. So I'm going to leave it the way it is for now. We'll just work on the end where we're going to grab it. We're still going octagon through here. Now I'm going around. I'm going to go ahead and work to a fairly low heat here, just because it helps smooth it up some, knocks the rest of the scale off. From center punch mark to center punch mark, we're really close. Although this set looks a little heavier, so I've done something. I haven't taken it quite as much out of this area on this set. So I suppose I'll go ahead and do just a little of that. So I just want to bring this a little bit closer to that punch mark that's there as a reference point. It's not critical. But that will make it look more like my previous piece. And since I try to make these in sets that match, we might as well make a match. And now they're the same length. So we need to cut this piece off. And I see where I want to cut it. I'm just going to mark it with the Hardy at this point. And I'm also going to cool this off now. I'm going to let it sit and air cool for just a minute so all the color is out before I quench it. Even though this is mild steel, it can still stress if you're not careful. So now the reins are cold enough to hold on to, and after all, that's what the reins are for. And we're going to cut this off. Make sure that that's about where I really want to cut it. That doesn't look right. Nope, that's exactly the same place as the other set. Looks long. Remember, when cutting off on a hardy, don't cut all the way through. Really hard on your hammer and your hardy, and you're going to launch this piece who knows where if you do it. So just cut it off close, and you can just break it off at the edge of the anvil where it's easy to find and pick up. That's down in a safe place. I don't even need to worry about it. As they say, here is the drill. We are going to set off an appropriate amount for the jaws, and this depends on what you're going to make. Do you need really long jaws for some chainmaker's tongs or pickup tongs, or some sort of V-bit tongs, or do you want short jaws for flat tongs? And I think we're going to make more flat jaw tongs because they're the easiest to understand. So I'm going to set off about that much. It's about, inch and a quarter, I guess. The exact amount's not real critical because we can trim later. It's closer to 1.5 inches. Then after that, I'm going to offset the jaw about half the thickness of my material. I'm going to roll it away from my hammer hand or towards my tong hand and set it at 45 degrees at the far edge of the anvil to forge the boss. Then roll it another 90 degrees towards my tong hand to forge the offset and the rein from the boss on the other side. And we'll be going back and forth and repeating these numerous times to refine everything. So the jaw gets forged here, the boss here, and the offset and the reins here. Go back and watch those earlier tong videos for the discussion on left-handed versus right-handed tongs. If you always roll towards your tong hand, they will always be correct, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. If I were left-handed and holding these in my right hand, I would roll these the other way and they would be the opposite. Half-face blows to create that shoulder. When you're letting the jaw spread out, you can work it back down later. Now we're going to go over here. We're going to push that jaw over straight in line. Now it went a little far, so we're going to straighten it back out. The idea here is to have a fairly straight line across here. So we're over here at the boss, and I'd like that to double in width, but it probably won't. And we're going to roll it one more time and offset it this way. And we're going to refine this over and over again. Now I would work this at or near a welding heat. There's just no reason not to. Now you see I've got that twisted, and that's because this rolls in my hand because of the round reins. That's one reason it's easier to start with the jaw in square stock so you can hold on to it. But if you don't have tongs to hold on to your tong stock while you make them, this is your only choice. Now on my first half, my boss is 1 inch wide and 5/16 thick. So that's what I'm going for this other one. I want those to be the same if I can. A little thicker wouldn't hurt, a little wider wouldn't hurt. This is the point that needs the most strength, so the more material you can have there, the better off you are. But 5/16 is exactly half the width of our original 5/8 bar. You can see this is thicker here. You need to make sure you keep that parallel in the whole boss. So at this point I'm just refining my shape. I'm going to try and refine that boss and make it just a little bit wider if I can. My other one's 1 inch, so I'd like to go 1 inch here if I can. And it's right there. Good. So is it starting to look like the first one? It's close. It's a little bit more refining. I may have to do a little bit of filing in here, but I'm going to see if I can forge it down. And then this jaw is just a little bit too long, so we'll work on that too. If you do all of this the same day, you're going to end up with much more consistent results. I did this first half probably several weeks ago when we first started talking about tongs, and I'm just now getting around to doing the second half. So it's easy to have trouble being consistent after a certain amount of time passes. But there are other ways to skin a cat here. Don't tell Smitty I said that. So that's pretty close. I think I want to finish this part of the reins next so that it's all ready to be a tong, and then we'll see if there's any more refining to do on the jaws. This one actually ends up much longer at this point than my sample, so I've done something different here, but we can fix that. Like I said, if you do all this in the same day, or 2 consecutive days even, you end up with much more consistent results than doing the 2 halves a month apart. We'll go to octagon. And the next heat we'll round that up a little bit. So let's not kid ourselves. This is why I own a power hammer. This is way faster under a power hammer. But you don't have to have one. Just because it's faster and easier doesn't mean it's a requirement. You can do this just like we're doing it here without a power hammer. I think that's getting close for the purposes of demonstration. So our reins are looking much closer to each other. Just a little bit of cleanup right here I think is really all we need. I'm going to chamfer the corners. Making sure this is fairly parallel. These aren't quite exactly the same size. It's not a big deal, but it wouldn't hurt if I can refine this boss a little bit more. I'll see if I can do that. But you can also file it a little bit if you need to, or ignore it, because once they're together you really can't see it. Now this other tong jaw is a little long, so I'm going to trim that off first. I trim that jaw up off camera because I forgot to turn the camera on. Sorry about that. But those are looking much better. And as usual, I'll do a little bit of trimming after they're together to make sure they match perfectly. As always, you have a choice of drilling a hole or punching a hole. We'll go ahead and punch this. Now to punch, start with the jaw off the anvil here and start there, and then you can come up to the pritchel hole. If you start here and go to the pritchel hole, you'll need a bolster under there, and that's okay too, but if you don't have the bolster, do it this way. Cool your punch from time to time. Go till it kind of bottoms out. Turn it up. You should be able to see a target mark there. Once you feel it shear, go over the pritchel hole, and you end up with a nice hole. We've talked about putting V-notches down the center of your flat jaw tongs in our previous tong making videos, so I'm not going to cover how to do that in any great detail, but I do recommend that you go watch those videos and that you add that detail because it does help. I'm doing it with a big V-fuller. I initially set the lines with a chisel, then I'm using the V-fuller under the treadle hammer. I can do it all in one heat that way, and we can get these assembled today. So the time has come to assemble our 2 tong halves. Why is it when you start with 2 halves, instead of ending up with a whole tong at the end, you end up with a pair of tongs? Oh well. Things to ponder, or the silly things I ponder. So we're going to put the rivet in, and we're going to set these in the forge so that that rivet gets hot. Now that's better in a coal forge. This is going to get real hot in a gas forge. But then we'll come out and set the rivet. In previous videos, I've just set the rivet at the anvil with the hammer. And that works, and you get a perfectly serviceable pair of tongs. But you'll end up with a neater job if you use a rivet set. So that has a depression that fits the rivet head. That goes in. You make sure everything's tight together. Start it this way, and then we can come back and use the top rivet set, which has the same depression, and we should end up with a very nice head on both sides. So our rivet is hot. I want to make sure it's set down. I want to start upsetting it. And we want to put the heading tool on here. Try and drive straight down. I think I'm going a little off here just because my rivet was starting to bow, but not bad. You see that leaves a nice round-headed rivet instead of an odd forged rivet. And if there's enough heat, you can start to work these open and close. If not, get them hot again. Don't stress that joint. But this makes a much cleaner rivet on your tongs. You'll be a lot happier with them in the long run if you use a rivet set. So now it's time for the final adjustment. You want to get the jaws in line. Make sure they work. You can see that this is really wonky here, so I'm going to heat that up, put this in the vise, and I'm going to adjust these back and forth, so that's what I want. So I can put those in. That holds the tongs the way I want them, and then I can bend these reins till they're in line. Now this all looks a little crooked to me. I think, yeah, we've got a little bit of a twist in there, so we're going to fix that. There we go. So this is where you fiddle with them until they're just exactly the pair of tongs you want. Don't settle. If you don't have a twisting wrench, go back and watch that video too. Okay. Now I'm pretty happy with the reins, but the jaws are still a little bit weird and we need to make them fit something. So I've got a little piece of 3/8 flat bar that I can put in the jaws. I'm going to squeeze them a little bit till they're a comfortable distance apart. And these have loosened up a little bit and need a little bit more tweaking in the rivet after all this. So I'm going to get my rivet set back out, and I'm going to set that rivet again. And you can just go back and forth until this is just exactly what you want. Again, we've made flat jaw tongs, which are kind of a jack of all trades but a master of none. For most uses, there are other tongs that are better. But I really encourage you to get good at flat jaw tongs to understand how to make tongs before you get out into making V-bit tongs and box jaw tongs and bolt tongs and chain makers tongs and hoop tongs and ring tongs and pickup tongs and wolf jaw tongs and who knows how many other kind of pair of tongs. But this is a good functional pair of tongs. They'll do a lot of things in the shop. There's lots of uses for them, but don't make 30 or 40 pair of them. If you've got a set of flat jaw tongs for 1/8, 3/16, quarter, 5/16, 3/8, and 1/2 inch material, you're probably in pretty good shape for flat jaw tongs. Now the rivet heading tools that I was showing you actually came from Ken's Custom Iron. They're the ones that we got the rapid tongs and quick tong blanks from. They watched my video and they appreciated the review, but they thought that I should have been showing you how to do this with a rivet set instead of freehand at the anvil, so they took pity on me and sent a set of rivet tongs, or excuse me, a set of riveting tools, the heading tools, so that we would do a little bit better job in the future. And of course my review of Ken's Custom Iron tongs had nothing to do with any hopes that they would compensate me in any way. So this isn't really a payback or anything else. It was just a very nice gesture on their part. And I will continue to review people's tools not based on any monetary concern. So if I review tools, it's based on my thoughts, not on hoping that they will pay me for doing a good job of reviewing their tools. So back to tongs. We have made flat jaw tongs from 1/4x1 flat stock and drawn out the reins. We have made them from Ken's Custom Iron's rapid tong blanks, which are a much heavier, more durable pair of tongs. And we've now made them from 5/8 square stock. All of these can be done without a pair of tongs if you do the reins first, or in the case of the Ken's Custom Iron tongs, if you do a temporary assembly without doing anything to the reins and then use them as tongs to make a second set, and then use the second set to finish the first set, if that makes sense. There are lots of things you can do if you don't have tongs and you need to make tongs. But we've shown you how to make at least 3 sets of tongs. You can use the same technique of drawing out the reins on another bar to do other flat stock style tongs like V-bit tongs, and that's what this set will be eventually. But we're not going to cover that too much in the future. We'll probably talk about it some more, but go out and make some tongs. You're going to need tongs to make tongs, and you're going to want nicer tongs than the flat jaw tongs. But make those, learn how to make tongs, get comfortable with the concept, and get comfortable with the concept we talked about today of start at the edge of the anvil, 90-degree turn towards your tong hand to form the boss, and 90-degree turn to make the offset. That's an important concept for your future in tong making. These other styles all work. You make excellent tongs. You might never want to do tongs this way, but I think you should learn. It's the traditional way of doing it, and it's an important skill for blacksmiths to have. That pair of tongs doesn't require drawing out the reins. If you have a power hammer, drawing out the reins from single piece of bar stock and using the power hammer is really a quick, efficient way to go. It makes a very strong pair of tongs. Nothing wrong with it. Drawing out the reins by hand takes a lot of time. If you learn to forge weld the reins, you can cut your time down considerably and not have to work as hard to make tongs and end up with outstanding tongs as well. You do the same procedure, which is why I think you need to learn that. Offset the jaw, 90 degrees towards your tong hand for the boss, another 90 degrees towards your tong hand to forge the offset. But that's all you have to do. You then cut this off and you forge weld it to a handle, to a rein. This becomes your rein. This is a little heavy. This is 1/2 inch. I think 5/16 or 3/8 is plenty. And that's the next way we're going to make tongs. And that's why I wanted to cover this. We're pretty much done talking about tongs without tongs. Now we're going to assume you have a pair of tongs so that we can do it this way. And that's going to also get back to our forge welding exercise. But why do I want to do that so soon? I have a project that we need this style of forge welding on that isn't a pair of tongs that I have to get done, and I thought you might want to see what I'm up to. And if you want to see it, you're just going to have to stick around. That'll be 2 or 3, maybe 4 videos from now, but it'll be this week when we get started. And the first thing we have to do is a drop tongs weld, just like you have to do to make tongs. So I hope that all makes sense. I hope you enjoy making yet another pair of flat jaw tongs. I'm not sure I need all these flat jaw tongs. I've got quite a few. This pair is actually a little wonky. I did not get my cross notch straight on one side, so it doesn't line up. And that's a little less useful, but they're still a useful pair of tongs. I think one of the simple sets that we did out of 1/4x1 and this pair, along with the 2 Hardy tools, are going to wind up on the Etsy shop. And they're going to be cheaper than I would charge if I were making tools for sale, because we're making them for the video, and I would just like to see them out there in the hands of somebody who can use them. So they'll be a pretty reasonable price, and I'm going to try and do that in the next day or two and get those Hardy tools on there as well. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd love it if you give it a thumbs up. If you have questions, ask the questions in the comment section. If you've got some options or other ways of doing things, feel free to express those in the comment section. If you've got your own YouTube channel, show me how you're making tongs. I'd love to watch. I'm sure some of the other people watching these videos would like to watch, and then share the link in the comment section. Sometimes YouTube will mark that as spam, but if I go in and it's a link to a video on doing something we've been doing, I'll approve it, and then it'll show up in the comments. If you'd like to support the channel financially, there is a link down in the comments section, and I'd love it if you'd leave a donation, but it's not required. The content is free, and I plan for the content to always be free. A donation is just a tip, and that's all it is. In the meantime, feel free to watch some of the other videos, share them with your friends, get out to the shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we'll see you around for the next one.